Now, the book of Isaiah has three major themes, and these may be summarized as a theme of conviction. God speaks greatly about conviction and how the conviction of sin and the overwhelming sense of sin and the wrath of God against sin is very much in this book. And if you've never been convicted of your sin, you have never been born again. Because the first step that the Holy Spirit, when He shall come, it says in John 16, He will convict the world of sin. And the first step of salvation is conviction of sin. And that's why people that just have kind of like a view of God like He's a big teddy bear and kind of like a grandpa and, this white-haired, friendly kind of Sam Walton figure, that rides around an old pickup and wouldn't hurt anybody, have never been convicted of their sins. Conviction, the overwhelming sense of sin and the wrath of God against sin. This is clearest in the 21 times that Isaiah uses the word woe. And it says in Isaiah 5:8, it says this, "Woe to those that join house to house." And there was a real greed in Israel. I'm working right now on a study of the decline and fall of Israel and the steps that led up to their decline and fall. And I think it's very significant because Israel were the people of God. And whenever the people of God, as far as the Christians, follow these same errors, we are also declining and falling from the power of God. And the first thing we saw about Israel in Isaiah 5:8 is they were greedy. They were stacking those houses in as close as they could and just trying to multiply their wealth. And there was greed in chapter 5, verse 8. In verse 11, "Woe to them that rise up early, that they may follow strong drink." There was indulgence. The people were just indulging themselves. And they just wanted to satisfy every desire they had. And isn't that a picture of our culture today? "And woe to those that draw iniquity with cords." In other words, it wasn't enough just to have a little iniquity. They had a whole sled of it, and they were pulling it behind them. And what it's talking about is, in chapter 5 and verse 18, that there was a woe against the evil that was in the hearts. And then verse 20 of chapter 5, "Woe to those that call good evil and evil good. Woe to deceivers." There are a lot of deceivers nowadays in churches. And they tell people, don't worry, God's not worried about that. No, you were born homosexual. And so don't feel that's don't get bent out of shape. That's just how you are. You were born an addict to whatever, and we have this whole concept in counseling now of taking the responsibility. And I was just reading about a pastor that got caught in adultery in Dallas, and he went to the big clinic there in Dallas, and they said, after about 6 weeks of counseling him, and I just read this in the paper, they said what happened was his father, who was a pastor, didn't have enough time for him. His father was only home 3 nights a week, and he only spent time with him 3 nights a week and on Saturdays and Sundays. And that wasn't enough time for the guy. He had a reservoir of love that was not filled, and so he found it in this affair, this adulterous affair, and so it really wasn't his fault. And so he went out and married the wife, or actually stole the wife of one of his assistant pastors, went off and took her away and married her, and now he's living unhappily ever after. Now, that is deception. Those counselors took the conviction of sin and placed it on his dad, who was long gone, and took the responsibility and put it on his dad. And God says, woe to the deceivers. Chapter 5, verse 21, "Woe to them that are wise in their own eyes." God pronounces a woe against pride. And if there was ever a proud, egotistical, self-centered, self-indulgent era, it's where we live now. Did you know that envy has been normalized? I mean, if you're envious of others, if you're greedy, if you're proud, that's the norm in our society. It's not bad. And I was just sharing some verses recently with my family from the book of Proverbs. My children looked at me and they said, "You mean in the olden days when you were little that they used to do this in the schools?" I said, "Yes, I remember getting paddled in school, in public school, being marshaled down to the principal, who was only this high and a woman. And man, she could swing that thing. I came right off the floor." And that was because there was still a little bit of Christian fabric left in our culture, and the self-centered, proud, where we are now, wasn't permeated yet. 5:22, "Woe to those that are mighty in drinking wine." They're mighty in mingling strong drink, the addicts. Chapter 10, verse 11, "Woe to those that decree unrighteous decrees." That's unethical politicians. The book of Isaiah is full of God's view of the sinfulness of man. Woe, 21 times in this book. In God's sight, all of our good deeds are like filthy rags. And if you are convinced you've done enough good to please God. And if you think that you'll probably make it, and if you think you're surely going to heaven, no doubt, then probably you aren't. Because the Scriptures say that those who have come to Christ are like Isaiah. He says, I'm undone in the presence of your holiness, as we'll see in just a minute. And someone that is truly born again is utterly aware that they could not or ever could save themselves. It's totally, marvelously of the grace of God. Secondly, a second major theme is confession. The all-pervading awareness of the power, the majesty, and the holiness of God, causing us to confess that He is powerful, He is majestic, He is holy. And 23 times Isaiah uses the divine name, the Holy One of God. This name is used all but 5 times by Isaiah. It's kind of a moniker of Isaiah. Whenever he talks about God, he talks about God as the Holy One of God. And Christ, of course, is the Holy One of God. And that's what the demons said when they met Christ here on earth. When he did his earthly ministry, they would say, "Oh, we know who you are. Thou art the Holy One of God." And finally, confidence. That's a third major theme. Conviction of sin, confession of the glory of God, confidence. And this book gives a crystal clear sight of salvation and the coming victory of Christ. And you know, when you read the book of Isaiah, you get done, you kind of walk out confident. Because he's going to win in the end. He's going to right all wrongs in the end. And he's going to redo and reformat this whole planet. And he's going to be victorious.